as if it has. This is where the narcissist becomes trapped in a painful contradiction. They want to run from what they have done, to shove it behind them, to persuade the world and, more importantly, themselves that it never really happened. But reality does not follow those rules. What happened did happen, and no amount of rewriting, denial, or manipulation can change that basic fact. Narcissists, by nature, are skilled storytellers, especially when the story is about themselves. They build narratives meant to protect their sense of superiority, their innocence, and their entitlement. They reshape events so they appear as the victim of your so-called overreaction or as the misunderstood mind in a harsh and unfair world. Yet this constant reshaping of the past comes at a cost. It demands that they continually push down, twist, and bury pieces of reality that threaten their illusion. And pushing reality down, especially in the mind, is not freedom. It is a form of captivity. The mind has many layers. Even if the narcissist convinces themselves on the surface that they were right, that you deserved what happened, or that they never truly hurt you at all, there is still a deeper part of them that remembers. Often hidden in the unconscious, that part holds the truth. It holds the guilt, the shame, and the awareness of harm. That truth may never come out as an apology or an admission, but it shows itself in other, more damaging ways. It appears as anxiety that never fully leaves. It shows up in broken relationships, in restlessness, in the inability to sit quietly with their own thoughts. We live in a culture that tries to tell us guilt is optional and responsibility can be avoided, but that idea does not hold up over time. The effects of our actions continue to echo, whether we admit them or not. For the narcissist, those echoes are deeply disturbing because the one thing they rely on to feel safe is control. Control over the story, control over how you see them, and control over how others perceive them. When that control is threatened by the truth, especially the truth that lives inside you, their entire inner structure begins to shake. Your memory becomes a mirror they cannot stand to face. Not because you are seeking revenge or holding on to bitterness, but because your existence as someone who knows the full story reminds them of what they cannot erase. And this is the most important point. They know. They may never admit it, they may never say it out loud. But beneath the layers of arrogance, excuses, and self-justification, they know what they did. They know they crossed boundaries. They know they betrayed trust that was freely given. That awareness is corrosive when it is buried instead of faced. Many people believe narcissists simply move on, that they harm others, discard them, and continue without consequence. But that view is shallow and incomplete. You cannot cause harm without leaving a mark, not only on the other person, but on yourself as well. The narcissist carries what they did like a shadow that follows them everywhere. The harder they try to deny it, the heavier that shadow becomes. This matters because people who survive narcissistic abuse often carry a fear that the narcissist escaped consequences, that they got away with everything. But there is a deeper kind of justice at work, one that is quiet and internal. The narcissist does not truly get away with it. They carry it within themselves, in the quiet moments, in the relationships that never quite work, in the slow erosion of their self-respect. This is where your strength becomes important. When you stop engaging, stop trying to convince them or others of the truth, and simply live as someone who knows what happened, you step into real power. Not power based on revenge, but power rooted in calm and clarity. You do not need to chase justice when justice is already unfolding from the inside outward. What they did is stamped into time, and time, though silent, is never neutral. So, when the narcissist tries to rewrite the past, remember this: the truth does not need you to fight for it, it only needs you to remain consistent. Over time, the truth has a way of surviving even the most carefully built lies. Silence is often misunderstood. Many people think silence means weakness or surrender. But that is not what real silence is, especially the kind that disrupts a narcissist's control. True silence is intentional. It is the deliberate removal of your energy, your attention, and your emotional reactions. For the narcissist, that silence is unbearable. For someone who feeds on reactions, drama, and emotional pull, your silence does not feel empty. It feels like exile. Narcissists function through psychological dependency. They create patterns of conflict, apology, reconciliation, and control to keep you connected to them. Sometimes this is obvious. Other times it is subtle. A small guilt trip, a cutting remark disguised as a joke, a half-hearted compliment. All of it is designed to keep you emotionally responsive. As long as you react, you are still playing your role in their script. Even if that script is painful or chaotic, your reaction fuels their sense of importance and control. When you become truly silent, the cycle breaks. The loop that kept them feeling powerful is cut. Suddenly, they are alone with their own thoughts, their own inner voice, their own conscience. This is terrifying for them because they are not built for honest self-reflection. Their entire inner world is designed to avoid it. That is why they project their faults onto others. That is why they twist reality and deny facts. That is why they lie, not only to you, but to themselves. When you remove yourself from their emotional reach, when you detach not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, you do more than walk away. You remove the stage they need in order to perform. Without your empathy, your explanations, or your emotional presence, they are left to face the results of their own behavior. It is important to understand this clearly. Narcissists are not only wounded by rejection, they are confused by it. They cannot make sense of it. In their inner world, they are always the center. So your silence, when it is calm, steady, and firm, creates a crack in their reality. It is not just that you stopped responding. It is that you became something they cannot control. That silent reflection is louder than any argument or confrontation ever could be. This is why they often escalate when you pull away. They may suddenly apologize without meaning it, show affection they never offered before, or invent emergencies to pull you back in. They may swing between pleading and blaming, doing whatever they can to restart the old pattern. Or they may turn cold, act indifferent, spread rumors, or provoke conflict, all to force a reaction. Any reaction will do. But if you remain silent, if you refuse to respond on their terms, the illusion begins to fall apart. When the illusion collapses, control goes with it. Your silence then becomes more than withdrawal. It becomes a boundary. It says clearly without words that they no longer have access to your emotions, your energy, or your inner world. This is something the narcissist cannot tolerate because it removes what they want most: psychological dominance. But there is an even deeper reason this works. Silence forces them to face what they have avoided for most of their life: reality. Not the version they edited and polished, but the one they cannot escape. A reality where they are no longer central, no longer admired, no longer feared. A reality where someone who once believed in them now sees them clearly and chooses to leave. This creates a deep narcissistic injury, one that cannot be healed by attention or praise. At the same time, this is where your healing begins. That silence does not only weaken their control, it strengthens you. It gives you room to reconnect with your values, your self respect, and your clarity. You are no longer trying to earn their approval or explain your pain. You are simply living, and that is a powerful form of freedom. Silence is not the absence of words, it is the presence of dignity. It is the calm that comes after chaos, steady and unshaken. When the narcissist feels their grip slipping, they cling to their last defense, the story, the carefully shaped version of reality where they are justified, heroic, or tragically misunderstood. For a while, that story may seem convincing. Others may even believe it. But truth has a persistent way of coming back, especially when it is rooted in lived experience. The greatest threat to a narcissist's false identity is not confrontation or accusation. It is the slow exposure of the lie they told themselves. That exposure begins when you step out of the role they assigned you. They may have painted you as unstable, needy, too sensitive, or cruel. That image protects their fragile self-image. But when you leave and do not collapse, when you rebuild quietly and with intention, that story stops making sense. You become proof that their version was never accurate. That is when their inner world begins to crack. The narcissist depends on others to confirm their reality. They need shared illusion to survive. And when that illusion fades, they are left with themselves and with the truth they tried so hard to escape. That is why they triangulate, smear, and manipulate social circles to keep their illusion alive. But that illusion only survives as long as people continue to believe it. The moment others start questioning things, the moment your behavior no longer matches their accusations, the story begins to fall apart. Small cracks appear. The narrative weakens. The carefully crafted plot starts to unravel. And here is something important to understand at a deeper level. The narcissist's self-image is not flexible or adaptable. It is stiff, fragile, and easily shattered. It cannot hold contradictions. A healthy person can face uncomfortable truths, accept mistakes, and change over time. A narcissist cannot do that. In their mind, they must either be flawless or completely victimized. There is no space in between. So when their story collapses, they do not correct it or reflect on it. They panic, they lash out, they redirect blame. They search for new scapegoats because the idea that they were wrong, or worse, responsible, is too threatening for their mind to handle. When this collapse happens, something powerful takes place. You stop being a character in their story and start becoming the author of your own. At first, the shift feels quiet and almost invisible, but it changes everything. Your silence, your distance, your healing process, all of it slowly rewrites the narrative. Not only for you, but for the people watching from the outside. Friends notice, family notices, even the narcissist notices, though they will never admit it. Your growth weakens the myth they created. Your clarity highlights their confusion. And that kind of silent exposure is unbearable for them because it cannot be debated. It cannot be shouted over. It does not need to explain itself. It simply exists. Now let's take this even further. Why does this matter beyond your personal situation? Because this reveals a larger truth about deception and integrity. Lies can appear powerful at first, especially when they are wrapped in charm, confidence, or emotional intensity. But lies decay with time. They break down from the inside. Truth does not need decoration or defense. Truth lasts, and people who align themselves with it, who live according to it become steadier, stronger, and more resilient. You do not need to run a campaign against the narcissist's version of events. You do not need to respond to every rumor or defend yourself against every accusation. What matters is that you live honestly, calmly, and with quiet strength. Nothing threatens a false narrative more than a truth that is lived openly and consistently. And this is where the story truly ends. Not with confrontation, not with revenge, but with peace. A peace built not on denial or fantasy, but on the quiet confidence of someone who knows what happened, who learned from it, who grew through it, and who now refuses to carry a story that never belonged to them in the first place. One of the most unsettling things you may witness when a narcissist realizes they have lost control is their sudden shift into bitterness and passive aggression. At first, it can be subtle. It may come across as sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or exaggerated indifference. But if you pay attention, you will notice something much deeper unfolding. This is not simple irritation or annoyance. This is the psychological aftermath of a collapsing ego, an ego that no longer has access to its usual source of emotional supply. When you withdraw, truly withdraw, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, you deprive the narcissist of what they need most: attention, validation, and above all, control. Without those things, they begin to decay internally. Irrelevance is something they cannot tolerate. To a narcissist, being ignored is not neutral. It feels like erasure. It feels like emotional death. So when you stop feeding their narrative, when you no longer respond to their bait or react to their provocations, they become driven by a need to punish you. Often, this punishment is not obvious or direct. Instead, it is subtle and indirect. That is where passive aggression becomes their final weapon. They may act as if you no longer matter, but their tone gives them away. The sarcasm carries bitterness. The small, sharp remarks disguised as jokes are carefully aimed. They might speak about you to others without naming you directly, suggesting that you are ungrateful, unstable, or not the person they thought you were. These are attempts to restore a sense of superiority. They try to regain control by shrinking you in quiet, almost deniable ways. But what is really happening underneath is projection. They are pushing onto you the emotions they cannot face in themselves: shame, insecurity, abandonment. Because if they accepted the truth that you saw through them, that you left not because you were weak, but because you were strong, they would be forced to confront a version of themselves they have avoided their entire life. And they are not capable of doing that. So instead, they strike indirectly, hoping to disturb your peace, your balance, your silence. What they fail to realize is that this behavior only confirms what you already know. Their bitterness exposes them. It shows clearly that they cannot tolerate accountability, growth, or loss. In an unexpected way, this can feel validating. It confirms that your decision to disengage was not only necessary, it was unavoidable. There is a quiet wisdom that develops when you watch all of this happen without reacting. It is not indifference, it is discernment. You begin to see that not every conflict deserves your energy, and not every comment deserves a reply. When you choose not to respond, not to justify yourself or strike back, you completely change the power dynamic. You become unreachable. Not because you are hiding, but because you are no longer emotionally accessible to their games. You have stepped out of the role they assigned to you, and by doing that, you make their tactics useless. There is something else